Yeah guys, what up, Viper here, and in the ever so fast-paced changing metagame in Illuvium, I have some really cool often meta-y strategy for you guys today. I think it is really powerful, maybe a bit on the difficult side to play, but super enjoyable, as there's just so much you can do, so much you can think about every single turn and every part of the game. So let's just get into it and show you guys what I'm talking about. So this is a team that I've recently been playing a lot, and I enjoy playing it a lot. Now, fundamentally, the idea is similar to how a lot of other teams are working right now, where we utilize the Toxic Colossus, the super insane strong early game opening. It's gonna get nerfed in the ground, right? It's just so broken, but well, we are just using it as well, as long as it is so strong, but we're doing a cool twist with it. And yeah, I get to that in a second, but fundamentally it is the similar old thing: Water Shield, Nature Cadulox, Toxic Colossus turn 1, equipping a Ranger suit, combining with that. Turn 2, you can downgrade the Ranger suit to either Cybernetic Vest or nothing, and you can go for a Riplance and a Greater Monk here, or the Exalted Monk here. Now, you want to decide which monkey to go for depending on the enemy team. If they play a very nature and fire oriented team, the Earth Monkey is going to get hyper and super strong. Earth counters fire and nature. And if they play a Earth/fire team, then the Monkier is going to be really good because it's a water dominant one. So well, decide based on the dominant to counter the enemy team basically on turn 2, and your Riplance will counter nature, and your nature Riplance will counter water and air enemies. So you kind of always have something to counter the enemy opening on turn 2, really strong. Now on turn 3, I think that is the cool thing about this team, and that's the cool thing that I've tried to make work in many different things, where I want to swap from the Toxic bonding on my Ranger to a Verdant bonding, and that leaves us with many different options. Now, if you did the standard opening of Cadulox into Riplance into Monk here, you have a 20 cost suit equipped. So you can unequip that and you have 140 mastery points plus switching the weapon. So a very simple option would be you go Nala Callion. You have a 3 Verdant, you still have 2 Colossus, you still have 2 Toxic in, and yeah, 3 Verdant, super tanky. Most teams can't kill anything on your team because they cannot have enough damage on turn 3 versus the health region that you have on the 3 Verdant synergy at that point. Now, another option that you have, because you have an Earth unit with the Greater Monk here in play, and a Twine is a Bulwark Verdant, the 1 stage lower version of Null, you can, for example, do Greater Earth Grocko, Scarabog, and Twine. That is 55 plus 50 plus 35, 140 points, exactly spending all your mastery points, and then you do still have 2 Colossus, because your Ranger is still Colossus Verdant, and you have a 3 Bulwark, 3 Earth, 2 Verdant. At that point, super tanky again, and if the enemy team is weak against Earth, very powerful. And that's probably still going to end up on the same line where your opponent can't really kill anything. Now, the cool thing on the 3 Earth line with the Twine on turn 3 is that next turn you can follow it up with, for example, Grilla and Lura, and then you have 5 Earth, just incredibly powerful early to mid game synergy, because a flat damage reduction is insane as long as the enemy doesn't have super high damage numbers, and they tend to not have super high damage numbers until later on in the game. Also, just bringing in 2 rogues can just be really catching people off guard, and yeah, I mean, that's what rogues do. They catch somebody off guard, they assassinate the high value unit, and then you just really hardcore win a round for free. And that is very powerful, as we've spoken about. Our turn 1 Toxic Colossus, that's the strongest turn 1 in the game. Our turn 2 Toxic Colossus plus 2 Berserkers, that's one of the strongest turn 2 in the game. And then the switch to the Verdant plus tanky setup on turn 3 in combination with still having Toxic and Berserker, that is one of the strongest turn 3s in the game. So your opponents are likely going to be on very low health totals on turn 4, and it's very likely that you can just finish them off on turn 4 very frequently. Now, let's count what is our turn 3 setup if we go for this, right? So we would have a Grocko, a Monkia, a Cadulox, a Twine, a Riplance, a Scarabog. That is 6 units, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So you can add the 2 rogues, then you're at 8 units, plus you can add augments, and speaking about Augments, at that point, for the highest tempo play, the highest kill the opponent on turn 4 play, it would likely be to go for a 30 cost attack speed and a 40 cost pure damage on your Greater Mankia Berserker. Now, the really cool thing about Mankia is Mankia's Omega ability is not an actual Omega ability, it's just that every second attack, it blasts outwards from the target, dealing damage in a medium area behind the target. That means that Mankia never stops auto-attacking, which is a very big difference to Riplands. Riplands are spending a lot of time casting its ability, making attack speed and attack damage buffs, pure attack damage buffs like the Photon Ripper, a lot worse as Augments, but also Mankia, the best Illuvium in the entire game for attack speed and attack damage Augments, because it just keeps auto-attacking, it never stops. So yeah, just doing the 5 Earth, doing this Verdant 3 Earth into 5 Earth into the Augments on Mankia is gonna be very, very powerful tempo play, and you will win a lot of games on turn 4 using exactly that. Now, if you have to play longer games, or if you didn't go for the Twine Scarabog Grokko on turn 3, you play it like a Nala Kellion, a free Verdant line, or whatever else, right? Especially if you do the free Verdant line, you can the next turn just go for example, Mankia and Twine. You just play even more Verdant Illuviums because all of them have these AoE healing fields around them. So you just combine playing a bunch of Verdant Illuviums plus a third Berserker to have even more damage. And all the Verdant AoE healing fields, they will keep all your Berserkers alive because it's AoE health region. It is very, very hard to kill those units then. And you can just pump a bunch of damage augments like resistance piercing, attack speed on both monkeys, pure attack damage. And yeah, that is essentially the other main option that you have. So to shortly recap this, turn 1, Cardulox, turn 2, Riplands Mankia, turn 3, you swap the bonding on the Cardulox to Verdant, and either you go for Twine Scarabog and Grokko, or you just go for Nala Kellion. And then turn 4, the follow-up option to Twine Scarabog Grokko, usually Grilla Lura for 5 Earth and just kill the opponent very quickly, and you have spare mastery points for 2 augments on your Mankia there. And the follow-up option to Nala Kellion is usually something like Exalted Mankia plus Twine. Maybe you just go for a Lura or a Grilla as like a backline disruption because of their taunt and charm abilities as well. Now, if you go for the triple Berserker option, that is the higher damage option against a lot of teams that play a lot of healing, like most of the Enchanter, Tsunami kind of setups. You probably want to go, well, Earth is not that good versus Water, aka Tsunami anyways, right? You probably want to go for the triple Berserker lineup, and you just pump damage augments on those Berserkers. And yeah, then obviously speaking against Psion teams, you're playing a very melee-oriented team. You would have a very hard time without the Ramfire option in your team. So you can just go something like, well, you don't bond your Ranger to Cardulox. You just probably pass on turn 1, and then on turn 2 you can just do like Ramfire plus a Null that can CC the enemies, and then you can put the Cardulox next turn to have better frontline. You can consider something like Ramfire, Grilla Lura, just going full rogue. On turn 2 already, you can consider going for various Earth lines and so on. I'll leave that up to you. I'll leave it up to testing for yourself as well, because I think it is really, really interesting figuring out the different lines of how to approach a lot of matchups and games with especially teams that run more than 8 or 9 Illuviums. And here we have very, very many different early game options. If you're not bonding for Cardulox though, rushing something like 5 Earth is very, very high on defense and probably gonna perform very, very well in most of the Ramfire bonding matchups, because, well, just Bulwark Earth, really, really good combo. Rogue, generally a good combo with Ramfire as well. Just adding to the strength of it and making it more difficult for the opponent to focus down the Ramfire if there are a Lura and a Grilla to the left and the right protecting it. And also, if you happen to get super, super late game, the Toxic Colossus bonding or even the Verdant Colossus bonding on the Cardulox don't have that crazy of an impact anymore, because enemies have really, really high damage. They can kill your team super, super quickly. So you do have the option of just switching to a 70 cost Gauntlet and a Ranger suit for your Ramfire, and just making that your late game win condition, especially against teams that don't have super, super tanky enemy carries, if they are more on the ranged Psion-ish kind of side of carries. You can certainly annihilate those with the Ramfire, even if you switch to it later on and you just played a normal Toxic Colossus Verdant kind of opening. Now, for gameplay, I want to jump to one of my recent games and one of my recent streams on Twitch. I'm live streaming on Twitch pretty much every single day. So if you guys want to see more content, more videos, and so on, you can go watch the Twitch VODs. They suck a bit because there's no background sound. It's getting filtered out and so on. So I would really suggest check out the live streams on Twitch. It's also Viper_ILV. And you have a lot more gameplay. And one of the gameplays that I can show you is one of the almost final iterations of this team that I was testing. I think I changed like an augment or two afterwards, but basically that's it. So let's get into this. So we can check opponent's team here. While my opponent is playing a very hard to see through strategy at the beginning, but once you try to figure out a bit, okay, there's a Water Shield Kadulok, so it's a Toxic Colossus opening. It's probably a Toxic Colossus into Earth opening, and then they eventually play a Tsunami Mystic Enchanter setup, which is what most people are playing. And my opponent is just running some Air Rogues and Vermilion Adorius in there as well, probably to counter a couple of specific matchups. Also, opponent is running a very defensive lineup of Augments. No Indomitable, no Invulnerable, and there's no Berserker setup, which is what people have deviated to mainly nowadays. Oh, yeah. So let's see this. It's similar early game. Legendary Augments are pretty much irrelevant in this game. And yeah, just the standard Toxic Colossus opening here. If you play Toxic Colossus versus Toxic Colossus opening, you want to frontline your Ranger, because your Ranger being focused and then Kaduloks taunting the enemies away is usually how you win this turn one. So yeah, the standard opponent going Kaduloks entirely in the middle would probably lose to my Ranger here, but my opponent doesn't only have Toxic Colossus here, they also have a Gorilla on turn one. So yeah, we can't beat that Gorilla. Opponent has a stronger turn one, stronger early game here. You don't have to watch that fight. There's not much going on there. Now, turn two. The really interesting thing on this positioning here is that your Ranger is getting slightly blocked by the Berserkers to the left and the right. So your Colossus Ranger will not be the first unit to walk up. It will be more your Berserkers are the first units to walk up towards the enemy. And then the Ranger follows them, and then the Ranger, due to Colossus, will taunt the enemies away from your Berserkers. So this positioning, like either on the left, on the right, in the middle, wherever, this is the safest positioning to have your Berserkers not be focused by the enemy melee damage dealers, because the Ranger is going to walk in, it's going to taunt the enemies away. Maybe it's even going to block some enemies walking in weird paths, making them like a pseudo CC at AFK, not attacking anything for a while. Very strong positioning to do the Ranger, like hex perfect in between the Berserkers here. Oh yeah, versus my opponent having a Rogue here though, I'm just gonna focus the Rogue with all of my Berserkers and my Ranger. You can see opponent went for 3 Earth on turn 2, but not really any other synergies there, so like a very strong turn 1, but on turn 2 my Berserkers are probably gonna pull through very close, because Earth is a really strong early game synergy, but after the toxic guys are dead, my toxic healings are kicking in and Berserkers are out damaging here. Toxic being incredibly strong early game synergy, because fights tend to take very long, so the percentage damage that a toxic poison debuff every second does just keeps ticking away on the enemy health pool. Plus, well, the healing portion of Toxic very strong, because once the enemy units die, there's not that much damage left, and something like a Kadulox can just get an extra like 800, 1000 HP in scenarios like here. Now here, you guys can see the switch to Verdant on my Ranger, and here we are just putting in Null Arcalion line, because the Arcalion is gonna do very well into the enemy Kadulox healing versus the poison toxic damage that is gonna come in. Also, Arcalion protected by 2 big tanks to the left and the right. I can put it in the front, I can have it take some damage, I can activate the Verdant healing here, and my Arcalion, yeah, can just deploy some more healing, take some more damage, get some more energy, and it's gonna get a lot of value here basically. Now you can see my monk here is getting stunned by the Grocko, getting stunned by the Lynx, it's getting beaten up. Just a kind of unfortunate positioning it walked there. So this turn is looking very, very difficult as my monk here is just getting focused by everything and my Cardulox and my Ranger are in the back. But now the Cardulox and the Ranger are getting focused instead of my Riplans. Having a Nature Riplans and a Nature Ranger here obviously not great versus the very earth heavy team of my opponent. They just got a bunch of hyper. But now with Overtime and Toxic, I do get a bunch of healing procs from the Toxic still, and the Verdant AoE healing field was just outperforming my opponent's team that didn't have much damage, but just a lot of upfront tankiness. Upfront tankiness not that good into the pure damage of Overtime. The Verdant and Toxic healing kind of just outperformed there. Now, Legendary Betting phase here is a bit uninteresting. There's just Sharp Start and the Corbomite Protocol. Sharp Start, one of the best damage augments you can get. Very, very strong to get that. Definitely want to free bet this here. And Corbomite Protocol not super valuable into my opponent's team because my opponent's team does not really have a super high single target damage like Arcanite teams. And they just have scaling damage with the Ranger and the ranged weapon. Now here, this is one of the setups where we go for the third Berserker Monkey. And you can either follow up the third Berserker Monkey with Lura and Grilla to have 2 Rogues and 3 Earth in as well. Very, very strong. Or you can follow it up with Twine for more backline CC, more Verdant healings, plus maybe just 1 Rogue that's, I don't know, gonna disrupt the enemy a little bit. Those are your main options here. Now, super, super strong legendary damage augment on the Monkier. Certainly want to use that. Certainly want to have Monkier beat away the enemy team here. Also, my enemy team being very earth heavy. The Exalted Monkier being water. Really popping off because it's probably going to get hyper and it's just going to deal so much damage. Now, there is the Cuculus with air countering the Monkier, but the Monkier is just surrounded by so much enemy earth units. As you can see, it's 5 earth, so it is eventually gonna get hyper. Monkier got hyper now, 2 damage augments. It's just gonna deal crazy amounts of damage here, and you guys can see Monkier is taking chip damage all the time, but the Verdant AoE healing field is keeping him at almost full HP. And yeah, like now both Monkiers could just like punch through the enemy team here, and we easily win this round. Also, a Null CCing the enemy Ranger, very, very huge in these kind of matchups. Now here, we can still play 2 more units, and again, it's still the question between Twine plus 1 Rogue or 2 Rogues. Both very, very reasonable options. Now I'm playing versus a Water Tsunami enemy carry though, so if I would send 2 Earth Rogues there, I would probably risk giving the enemy Ranger hyper as well. And Twine, the same as Null, will likely root and uproot and CC. I mean, there's like, I don't know the wording, but it's 1.75 seconds on crowd control on the furthest 2 enemy units. So very, very strong ability into something that is sitting in a corner here. And yeah, that's why we put the Lura in there as well. Just maybe it's going to get a charm off. It's probably just going to die, but it's going to keep some of the enemy team busy. So that is very, very okay. And we're just going to give some Omnivamp to our 2 monkeys here. Now, one thing about Omnivamp in this setup is it's a bit risky because if opponents play anti-healing augments are already very powerful versus your Verdant team. So if your opponent goes for like super anti-healing augments as well, you can just decide to drop out of the Verdant, like super heavy Verdant oriented strategy, and you can decide to go for a more earth oriented strategy, so you can counter their counter to your just healing oriented thing as well. Oh yeah, you can see here we just again have our monkey gets hyper, it gets healing from the Verdant guys around him, just being protected by the tanks, and yeah, it's chipping away the enemy team, it's dealing crazy amounts of damage. And that is kind of just how the matchup goes. You're just stat checking your opponent. You have just so much damage, so much healing, so much tankiness here, and you just run the enemy teams down with this. As basically the main idea of the team. You're just overwhelming the opponent with the stats: Berserkers, Toxic, Colossus, Verdant, healing, Earth, damage mitigation, everything coming together. And yeah, there we go. In this list, as you can see, I was still testing out a 2 photogenic unity. I think that is a very good augment to test out in this team as well, because not the Omega power, but the crit chance and crit amp version on these augments, very good. If the enemy team can't kill your Berserkers until like 20, 25, 30 seconds into the fight, and they all have a super high crit chance and crit amp buffs, they are gonna be dealing crazy amounts of damage. So yeah, I would suggest maybe testing out a dead augment as well. I've been loving it in a lot of teams recently. I think it's very good, because a lot of fights do go to overtime, do go very late. A lot of teams are very defensive, very scaling oriented, so scaling damage augments should be performing really well there either. So again, this and you can see there's like, I don't know, more hours of gameplay here. One of the shorter streams even. Go check out Twitch if you want to see more gameplay, especially live streaming pretty much every day. I will have a stream schedule soon, but usually it's like afternoon European to night European times at the moment. So I appreciate everybody hanging out and watching the YouTube video, and see you guys on Twitch. Bye bye.